In the forgotten city of Varenthal, where the wind wept through broken towers like a choir of ghosts and the sky forever burned in shades of dying amber, a young wanderer named Kael walked alone, carrying on his back a rusted lantern said to contain the final spark of an ancient star. He had inherited it from his father, a man whose last breath had been a warning that echoed endlessly in Kael's mind. When the world goes silent, light this lantern, and run. Varenthal had once been a thriving capital of innovation and magic, but something called the Quiet Veil had swept across the land years before Kael's birth, an eerie phenomenon that stole sound, drained color from the edges of reality, and left people staring blankly as though their souls had forgotten how to inhabit their bodies. Some claimed it was a curse born from the arrogance of kings, while others believed it was the slow revenge of the world itself, tired of human greed. As Kael traveled through the skeletal remains of the city, he could hear nothing but his own heartbeat pounding inside his skull, a constant reminder that he was still alive while the rest of the world had become an eternal whisper. Yet every so often he felt as though unseen eyes watched him from the shadows of toppled archways and shattered statues. He had grown used to loneliness, to the way memories clung to him like dust, but something about today felt different, a tension in the air, a shiver running along the lantern's metal frame as though the star within sensed danger. Kael approached the center of the city, where a grand plaza lay covered in vines that glowed faintly with eerie bioluminescence. In its center stood the Monument of Echoes, a towering spiral of obsidian carved with stories lost to time. Legend said that the monument still whispered truths to those who dared touch its surface, but Kael had never believed in such tales until he reached out, fingertips brushing the cold stone, and suddenly, the world around him roared to life. For the first time since the Quiet Veil fell, Kael heard sound, not just any sound, but a chorus of voices crying out in anguish, swirling around him in a storm of grief and memory. He staggered back, but the monument pulled him forward like a tidal wave of history, forcing visions into his mind. A great war between celestial guardians and shadow-born titans, a king who sought to cage the stars themselves, a betrayal that fractured the balance between light and darkness. Kael saw his father among the star guardians, holding the very lantern Kael now carried, running through burning skies to protect the final spark from falling into the hands of a monstrous figure wearing a crown of thorns forged from broken constellations. The voice of the monument thundered inside him, the Quiet Veil was only the beginning. The darkness has awakened, the lantern must be brought to the celestial gate before the final eclipse. And then, as abruptly as it began, the sound vanished, plunging Kael back into suffocating silence. His legs trembled as he stumbled away, trying to understand what he had just witnessed. His father had been part of a celestial order. The lantern was more than a relic. The world was on the brink of collapse. The weight of destiny pressed heavy on Kael's shoulders, but before he could gather his thoughts, he felt the ground shake beneath his feet. Cracks spiraled across the plaza, and from within them seeped a dark mist that twisted like living smoke. A pair of glowing crimson eyes emerged from the depths, followed by a humanoid shape made of pure shadow, one of the Velborn, creatures birthed from the Quiet Veil itself, said to hunt any who dared disturb the remnants of the old magic. It growled a soundless growl, raising a clawed hand toward Kael, but the lantern at his side ignited in a flash of blinding white flame, forcing the creature to recoil with a silent scream of agony. Kael didn't hesitate. Gripping the lantern, he ran as fast as his legs could carry him, racing through the ruins as beams of pale fire erupted behind him every time the lantern flared against the encroaching darkness. He didn't know where the celestial gate was or how he would find it, but he knew one thing for certain. Something ancient and monstrous was now hunting him, and the last spark of the stars was all that stood between salvation and oblivion. As he disappeared into the horizon, the faintest echo of a forgotten prophecy lingered in the air. When the final spark finds its bearer, the world will choose between rebirth, or eternal silence. And so Kael's journey began, the fate of the world flickering in a lantern he barely understood, but he vowed that as long as he breathed, he would carry this light into the darkest places, for he believed that even in a world drowned in silence, a single spark could ignite a new dawn. And to everyone watching this unfolding legend, remember, if stories like this ignite something in your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because your support fuels the creation of more worlds, more adventures, and more sparks of light in the darkness. Kael ran until the ruins of Varenthal were nothing more than jagged silhouettes against the horizon, and still he did not stop, for the air behind him shuddered with the presence of the Velborn that stalked his steps like wolves made of night. Though no sound escaped their bodies, he could feel their pursuit in the vibration of the earth, like the heartbeat of a dying world pounding beneath his feet. When darkness began to swallow the sky, he reached the edge of the whispering expanse, an endless desert of pale silver sand that shimmered like moonlight even without any sun to guide it. Few had ever crossed this wasteland and returned, for the sands were alive with memory, carrying the echoes of those who had perished there. But Kael had no choice, the prophecy whispering relentlessly in the back of his mind, urging him forward. As he stepped onto the dunes, the lantern flickered, casting thin beams of starlight across the desert that revealed fleeting silhouettes, shadows of travelers long gone, replaying their final moments in slow, haunting illusions. Kael gritted his teeth and pushed forward, but the memories soon coiled around him like snakes, showing him visions of his father kneeling beside a broken celestial guardian, of battles fought among constellations, of the terrible creature with the crown of shattered stars who sought to end all sound and light. The visions tugged at Kael's resolve, tempting him to surrender to despair, but the lantern pulsed anew, sending a warm surge through his body that reminded him of the promise he made at the Monument of Echoes. After hours of walking, Kael collapsed beside a dune shaped like a crescent moon, exhaustion gnawing at his bones. He drifted into a restless sleep, only to wake to the sight of a young woman standing before him, her eyes glowing faintly with teal luminescence and her body adorned with markings that resembled constellations. She introduced herself without words, for her voice entered his mind like a beam of light-piercing fog. "I am Lyra, last of the Starbenders." I felt the lantern awaken. Kael staggered to his feet, unsure whether she was real or another desert mirage, but the presence she carried, steady, ancient, and sorrowful, was undeniably tangible. Lyra explained that the Starbenders once guided the light of the celestial realms into the mortal world, preserving harmony between the two, but when the quiet veil fell, her people sacrificed their existence to hold back the darkness. Only she survived, hidden deep within the whispering expanse, waiting for the spark to be reborn in a new bearer. Kael's heart pounded as she revealed the truth of the lantern. It was not just the last spark of a fallen star, it was the failsafe to reignite the celestial gate, a portal that connected humanity to the higher realms of light. Without it, the world would collapse into total silence, swallowed by the being known only as the Aesir, the crowned figure from his visions. Lyra warned him that the Velborn pursuing him were only scouts. The Aesir had awakened fully, sensing the spark's resurrection, and now sought to consume it before Kael could reach the gate. Together they journeyed deeper into the desert, moving swiftly under the guidance of Lyra's starlit magic, but the sands grew hostile, shifting and rising into towering waves as though the desert itself sought to bury them. Phantom storms erupted without warning, each carrying echoes that formed into monstrous shapes made of pure memory, their cries silenced by the quiet veil yet felt in the trembling of Kael's spine. Lyra fought with graceful, sweeping motions that summoned shields and blasts of shimmering light, while Kael protected the lantern with everything he had, its flame growing brighter with each threat. Days passed, or perhaps mere hours, time lost meaning in the expanse, until at last they reached the base of a colossal stone archway half buried beneath the sands. This was the threshold of dawns, the guardian gate meant to lead wanderers to the celestial gate's true location. But as they approached, a crack split the sky like a jagged wound, and the world trembled as an army of Velborn crawled from the rift, surrounding them in a tightening circle. Kael clutched the lantern, heart racing, but before he could move, the Aesir emerged from the center of the rift, towering over all, his form shifting like smoke and shadow, adorned with the broken constellation crown. Though the creature made no sound, Kael felt its intent, a deep, suffocating desire to extinguish all stars, all voice, all life. Lyra stepped forward, starlight streaming from her hands as she prepared to sacrifice herself to protect Kael, but he refused to let her stand alone. The lantern roared with a brilliance it had never shown before, its tiny spark expanding into a blazing sphere of celestial fire that illuminated the entire desert. The Aesir recoiled, its faceless form twisting violently, but the Velborn surged toward Kael in response, ready to smother the light. In that moment, Kael remembered the prophecy: when the final spark finds its bearer, the world will choose. With a shout that tore through the silence, a sound born from sheer will, breaking the grip of the quiet veil, Kael unleashed the lantern's full power. Starlight exploded outward, tearing through the darkness, shattering Velborn like brittle glass, and forcing even the Aesir to retreat into the collapsing rift. The threshold of dawns responded, glowing brighter than a sunrise, its archway opening into a swirling cosmic pathway that led straight to the celestial gate. As the desert trembled back to stillness, Lyra turned to Kael, tears glimmering like liquid constellations, and placed her hand on his shoulder. "Your journey is far from over," she told him, "but you carry the hope of every world within that flame. Do not falter." Together they stepped through the archway, entering the radiant unknown, ready to fight for rebirth against the darkness threatening to freeze existence itself. And to everyone watching this legend unfold, if Kael's journey inspires you, if this world pulls you in, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because more incredible stories, worlds, and battles between light and shadow are waiting just beyond the next dawn.